Hey everyone, welcome back to Queer AuDHD BIPOC. I'm your host TQ, a queer, trans, Chinese Singaporean AuDHDer and a student of this community. This podcast and our upcoming book is to help other queer, Black, Brown, Indigenous, Asian, South Asian, Middle Eastern, and people of color who are both autistic and ADHD feel seen, less alone, and supported while living in multiple margins. Today, I am joined by a fellow autistic community member, and I think I've mentioned this community a few times. It's one of the few online autistic communities I found that have a BIPOC space, and I met Lakan Ubaya Nagsalad on there. Thank you so much for joining us today. Could you please introduce yourself and your identities and pronouns?
Hi, I'm Lakan Ubaya, and my pronouns are he and it, and my ancestry is Tagalog and Chinoy. And Chinoy is like people who migrated from China to the Philippines way back when. And I identify and also was diagnosed as AuDHD and bipolar. And what else? I don't know. I have so many different aspects of my identity that are connected to being autistic. So also autigender or agender, genderqueer, like all of those things also describe aspects
Mhm.
of me. I'm also queer and kind of in a place of exploring like different aspects of my sexuality and relational descriptors. So like gray romantic is one of them that I also identify with.
Mhm.
Non-monogamous is another.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing all of that. How did you find out that you're both autistic and ADHD?
Well, funny story. I didn't know. I feel like a lot of other people knew before me. So I found out because I was in couples therapy with my partner, and we've been having a lot of discussions around communication style and why we were having some problems, like sort of receiving each other's communication and communicating in ways that the other person was able to receive.
Mhm.
And our therapist just paused the conversation and looked at us and was just like, have either of you ever considered neurodivergence? And we were like, yeah, that other guy is totally neurodivergent. Because my partner
Mhm.
also has like physical history of TBI and
Sorry, what's that? Is that
TBI,
tuberc?
like a traumatic brain
Oh,
injury.
traumatic brain. Okay.
Yeah. And so I was thinking that about him. I was like, oh, yeah, sure. Like that's part of the way that he thinks and operates in the world. And he was thinking, oh, well, this other person also has some neurodivergence happening too. And it was just fun. It's like that Spider-Man meme where the two Spider-Men are pointing at each other and they look
Yeah.
identical. It was like that. And then the therapist was like, okay, so to me, it was like, okay, I think you should look into autism. And then to my partner, it was like, I think you should look into ADHD because I think that these types neurotypes are influencing your communication.
Mhm.
And it was like it blew my mind. I was like, what? Because my understanding of autism was just very limited. It was,
Mhm.
what I had read in medical textbooks because I went to med school. And so that's just what I knew, which, obviously doesn't capture a lot of people's experiences. And it's
Mhm.
from a very limited clinical view, right? Like,
Mhm.
focused on the stereotype of like young white boys, young cis het white boys, and like what that looks like. And so everyone else outside of that experience is often misdiagnosed or undiagnosed or underdiagnosed. And
Mhm.
so my therapist suggested that I go look at social media and search hashtag actually autistic to look at content that was actually created by actually autistic people and what those experiences were like. And it blew my mind. Like I just was like, wow. Like I think every late diagnosed autistic or late identified autistic has that experience where their whole life flashes before their eyes and they start rewriting everything with the
Yeah.
lens of
Mhm.
autism. And so like it was like I think months and months, like maybe up to a year where I was just like obsessively looking at these things on TikTok and Instagram and just learning more and more and more. It's like almost a requirement that autism becomes your special interest, at least for the beginning
Yeah.
it did for me at least, and some other folks I know. If that
Mhm.
becomes your special interest, when you start understanding that that might be you. I think maybe a little over a year after that, I went and got a formal diagnosis and was formally diagnosed with autism and ADHD. And then,
Mhm.
so that was maybe like 2022, something like that. So not that long ago, 3, 4 years
Mm.
ago.
Mhm.
And then this past year and a half, I've been working with my individual therapist and just kind of like matching some patterns that I have that are very, very bipolar.
Mhm.
And I don't have like she basically was like, yeah, you have this. We're not going to necessarily put it in your chart because, that's kind of a tricky thing. Like when you have these things diagnosed on paper and then what that does to, well, I'm not going to go too much into that, but anyways, there's not, for me at this point, there's not a benefit to having it written out as a diagnosis in my medical records. At some point that might change and I might ask for that, but for now, she knows and I know, and that's what's important.
Oh, the getting it written on paper, are you referring to like bipolar?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I mean, I know what you mean. I have a
Yeah,
lot of
there it's
friends who,
complicated.
yeah, I have friends who also don't want an official diagnosis for, safety reasons with the
Hmm.
mental health industrial complex being what it is. What was the journey of accessing a diagnosis like? You're based in the US, right? And like navigating
Yeah.
the healthcare system to get a diagnosis.
So I was really, really, really lucky because here it can be like, like thousands of dollars to get a diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
I think especially as an adult, just because there's fewer resources around for adults, and I don't have a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
But I was in my searches of hashtag actually autistic, I was following some accounts where people reposted an offering of another BIPOC autistic individual who was a therapist and qualified to do evaluations. So this person was offering evaluations at a very steep discount, like specifically for BIPOC, and I was able to access that. And it was like it was something like a little under $100, which
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that is still inaccessible to some people, but compared to thousands of dollars,
Yeah.
it was a lot more accessible. So I was able to get the diagnosis that way. And it was really great to be able to work with another BIPOC autistic professional who gets it, from personal experience and
Yeah.
wasn't really doing it from like a very pathologizing orientation.
Yeah, wow. Is the name of this practitioner like something you'd be willing to share that we can share with the audience?
Yes, I don't remember the name of the person anymore
That's
because it
okay.
was so
It's
long
okay.
ago, but I
Yeah.
am happy to look it up and send it to you. I don't know if they're doing it anymore because
Mm-hmm.
it was like a very limited time thing, but
Mm-hmm.
I think this person would be a great resource to just have.
I'm glad that you shared your experience. How did your life change after getting the diagnosis?
Some of it changed a lot and some of it didn't. So I think in my relationships with people, that was huge because in my relationship with my partner, especially because that was really clarifying on how to communicate with each other better and
Mm-hmm.
understand each other. It also changed the way that I like set up my home environment and my work environment, like especially for sensory needs.
Yeah.
For the most part, I've tried to work for myself the last few years, which
Mm-hmm.
means I have a little more control over my environment. And I'm also able to communicate to my patients that I have, this neurotype. And so for the most part, people understand like what to expect because I try to be very explicit that
Mm-hmm.
like, yes, I am autistic. I'm going to think about things a little bit differently. I find that the more explicit I am about that at work, the easier it is to also provide accommodations for other people who come and see me. Every autistic has like different things that they need to feel comfortable, just like every person has different things, just in
Yeah.
general. I have a very low scent environment,
Mm-hmm.
like fragrance free soap. I don't use scented products for the most part in my environment. It's like very quiet. It's easy to kind of modify like the lighting situation if folks are more photosensitive. I usually just work with one person at a time.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like very private. There's not like a lot of other social interactions happening. So that's very low stimulation. And because I work with one-on-one, it's I think easier to communicate and give people extra time, like if they're late or if they need things explained more or whatever it is. So understanding those things about myself makes it a lot easier to just be in relationship with other people in general.
I have so many questions because, like you mentioned, going to med school and then you having your own. Is it correct to describe it as an acupuncture practice now?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and
yeah.
then like
So
how those frameworks affect your view of like neurodivergence, having gone through like the Western framework and then now practicing acupuncture and obviously also providing all these like accommodations to your patients.
well, I didn't go through really a Western training because
Okay.
I count my acupuncture school. I do acupuncture, Chinese herbal medicine,
Hmm.
and different other therapies like qigong and tuina, which is body work. So it's because I have that framework around medicine, it made a lot of my neurodivergent elements seem very normal
Mm,
because the paradigm is so different, right? Like
mhm,
in a lot of traditional medicines, not just Chinese medicine, but we look at constitutional types. So, like, is someone predominantly, and I'm going to use like elemental language, like, is someone predominantly water or someone more fire or earth? Or wood or metal or whatever. And it is like a very non-pathologizing way of looking at patterns and differences in people. So it's like we all have imbalances. That's like very normal. Like we all
mhm,
have certain tendencies and certain traits. Not all water people are going to be exactly the same, but they're going to have kind of like some characteristics in common.
mhm,
And these elements describe personality, but also physicality and tendencies that people have. And it's not that different from thinking of neurotype, I think,
mhm,
where if someone is in the appropriate environment, it's easy to thrive. And when they're not in an appropriate environment or not given the appropriate things that they need, it's like very difficult to thrive.
mhm.
And
Yeah.
so if you think of it more as like harmonizing someone internally, but also in relationship to their exterior, that's what the medicine is. It's not like you're not necessarily curing anybody. You're just
Mhm,
helping remove obstacles so that person can come into balance.
mhm.
And
Yeah.
so that is just like that. I think having that education already set me up to think differently about neurotypes.
Mhm,
So I just like I just didn't notice.
mhm,
I didn't notice that I was neurodivergent. Like I had an awareness that I have trauma and that I have depression and anxiety because of my own family history, but also like living in like a really oppressive society where I'm at a lot of different intersections. So it was easy to attribute a lot of those things to other diagnoses or other experiences.
mhm,
And because of what Chinese medicine, East Asian medicine is, it's a lot of pattern seeking. So it just fit my brain really well.
mhm.
So I didn't stand out in that
Mhm.
way.
Oh, that is so interesting. I'm sorry I made the assumption about like Western medicine as like
That's
so
okay.
you're referring to well my own bias is showing. Yeah, you're referring to like the training you underwent for your acupuncture practice, right? Okay. That's going to give me a lot to think about. I've also been reading papers about how traditional Chinese medicine views autism. And it also talks a lot about like the elements that you mentioned. I didn't read very deeply into it, but yeah, the way TCM responds to it in China is so different from I mean what we see elsewhere.
Yeah. It's like you're also grouping symptoms differently
Mhm.
than you do in Western diagnoses. So it's like, yeah, like let me think of an example. So a lot of the people that I actually treat in my patient population happen to be neurodivergent. So I see a lot of folks with autism and or ADHD, and there's a lot of commonalities in folks. So I'll see a lot of AuDHD folks who also have MCAS. So that's, oh my God, now I'm forgetting what MCAS means.
Oh, it's okay. I have
Mast
it.
cell mast
Mast
cell
cell
activation
activation.
activation syndrome. Yeah, so there's like a lot of co-occurrence of MCAS, POTS, which is postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, a lot of IBS. It's like so many acronyms. So
Yes.
so
Alphabet
a lot of
soup.
IBS. And a lot of so you have all these different diagnoses and conditions, right? And a lot of it from like Chinese medicine perspective, there's a lot of overlap with this diagnosis called wood earth imbalance or wood attacking earth in
Hmm.
in the body. So it's like a lot of constraint and stagnation. So like feeling like very tense all the time, like emotionally and physically. And then because that tension is not released outwards, that's like the wood, right? That's wood energy is like wood likes to move and to like break through barriers and stuff. And so when that energy is not moved properly, it goes internally and it damages the body.
Hmm.
And so the wood is damaging earth, and earth is it kind of controls the more of the digestive system, and
Hmm.
also it keeps things in the body in the places they should be. So you
Hmm.
think of like earth is like very grounding, it's very fixed, it helps things stay where they're supposed to be. So when wood is starting to attack earth, you have digestive upset. So like people who their digestion it becomes much worse because they're stressed out. That's like a wood earth imbalance
Hmm.
or people have that constraint that would constraint and then they become kind of fixated on things like earth again that fixed like very stable stabilizing force And then if when it's out of balance, it's like fixation or obsession or being very stuck emotionally on something. I have that too, like where I become like I'm not able to move on sometimes in my thoughts, where I get kind of stuck on something and it's like rumination, like over and over and
Yeah.
over and over again, or worry.
Mm-hmm.
And so I see like those happen in people who are autistic, and then I see those things also present in autistic people as well, in a lot of the like very common conditions that happen. So that I'm just using the digestive thing as an example because it's
Mm-hmm.
so common. Like most people that I see in my clinic have something happening digestively that is
Mm-hmm.
much worse with stress, and it seems more frequent in people who are ADHD than people who are not,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's
Yeah.
like, reflux or nausea or dizziness or any of those things.
Yeah, I definitely saw those in those papers from China too about gastrointestinal disorders. And then it's also related to people with hypermobile
Yeah,
Ehlers-Danlos
exactly.
syndrome, which is
Yeah,
also
EDS. Hmm.
highly co-occurring with autism. And I also want to ask you, so you mentioned that your couples therapist told your partner to look into ADHD and then told you to look into autism, and then you found out that you're both. Did that surprise you? Do you ever like struggle with how the two neurotypes manifest in like a single person?
Yeah, I was so fixated on the autistic part. I just didn't pay attention to the possibility of ADHD. So I was a little surprised when
Hmm.
I got that diagnosis, because I think when you have, like for me, like having the combination of both of them, like one kind of masks the other.
Hmm.
So it made sense later, because I was like, yeah, a lot of the things that I thought about myself that were just duality, where I'm like, both really driven, but also it's like very hard for me to concentrate. Like it never showed up as a like a measurable learning disability,
Hmm.
because for a lot of my, like for a lot of my schooling, I was able to get really good grades.
Hmm.
And then things would happen where I would, like, if I wasn't interested in a topic, I could not study it. Like, I
Yeah.
could not retain the information. So I would have like periods of my schooling where I'm like, oh, straight A's all the way. And then all of a sudden, like an F in a subject the next, it could have been the same subject I got an A on, and then an F in the subject the next semester or something.
Wow.
It was always very frustrating because it's like, well, I have this history of being able to study, and then I have this thing that's happening right now, and I don't understand like why I can't do the thing I was just doing, a month ago.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I have similar experience. So I wanted to pivot to, you've already alluded to some aspects of this, but how do parts of who you are, like your ethnicity, gender, queerness, yeah, chronic illness, or living in diaspora, shape your ADHD experience?
That's so hard to answer because all of it is so intertwined. So I'm just having this thought that, like, I'm curious what you think about this too, where being in disability spaces and neurodivergent spaces that are predominantly white, a lot of times that identity of disability, it's like it overshadows all other parts of identity. Not overshadows, but it becomes like the most prominent thing about someone and their experience. I'm
Mhm.
not saying that that is wrong. I'm not critical of that. But coming from so many other intersections, it doesn't shine brighter than all of these other aspects of myself. If I put it into a metaphor, it's like if I'm making a soup with a lot of ingredients, one ingredient doesn't stand out next to
Mhm.
all the other ingredients. Everything is like very incorporated into one flavor, even though each of these things is like a distinct component, like the totality of everything is its own specific flavor. When I think about how all of these things are combining into my experience and how they shape autism, I'm like, I don't even know if we were to go way far back, like pre-colonial in the Philippines, would I even be considered autistic or like neurodivergent? I have no idea. I'm pretty sure that way of looking at neurotypes is completely influenced by colonialism and capitalism, and how productive am I
Yeah.
compared to other people who are of a different neurotype.
Just now, when you were talking about being in predominantly white spaces, I just want to clarify, we're referring to like how any conversation outside of talking mostly about disability kind of fell to the wayside. Is that kind of what you're saying?
I can give an example it's not specifically autism related. It is white disability space related,
Hmm.
where I still am very COVID cautious.
Same.
And a lot of the COVID cautious spaces that I'm in happen to be very white. Not all of them, but a lot of them are very white. And there is a thing that happens where people's COVID cautiousness almost becomes Christianized in a puritanical way, where it's like very, if you are not exactly this kind of COVID cautious and this then you're obviously a bad person. You don't care about your community. There's a lot of pressure to be like this most super strict type of COVID cautious in some of these circles. I already do a lot of those practices, but when you don't take into consideration the context of people who are making different choices around some of their COVID cautiousness, then it's like a purity culture thing instead of a collective liberation thing. If you're a person of color and you work a service job, there's a lot of service jobs where it's very hard to do that when you have a mask on because people
Hmm.
can't hear you or they treat you a lot differently. And they do treat you differently when you're
Hmm.
masking in a non-masking space. And
Hmm.
if your livelihood depends on tips or depends on customers really liking you, then it's more complicated, right? Because then you're facing like the survival needs of having income and a roof over your head and food, and then the risk
Yeah.
of infection. Or like people being able to work from home all the time and being able to be very, very strict about their COVID protocol, which is totally great if you can do that. Most people don't have a work from home job. I have friends who are trans and they get misgendered a lot more because they mask, because these are trans masculine people who, because they wear a mask, they can't demonstrate gender via facial hair. And
Yeah.
so that's another thing where it's, it sucks to feel misgendered all the time. And then also it's a safety thing. Like if you are trying to be stealth or to pass in certain areas, that option is compromised. That's not collective liberation either. If you're only thinking of disability justice from this very narrow lens and it becomes about a purity of politics, that is,
Yes.
to me, that's a white supremacist
Yeah.
feature.
I think white supremacy culture is really good at doing that, like co-opting nearly any movement and turning it on itself by insisting on purity.
Yeah, it's very, very tricky because the behavior will look very similar.
I totally get what you mean. But the other question, because I'm trying to break the intersectionally question down into something a bit more bite-sized. What was your journey of exploring gender identity like? Was it like kind of parallel to, your journey of getting diagnosed with ADHD? Because like it is for some people and it's not for some people.
Yeah, so that timeline was like decades apart.
Mm.
I like started having questioning gender. Well, let's see. My first memories of like questioning gender was not really questioning gender. It was just like doing stuff and then later realizing, oh, that's a little bit out of what most people do. Like
Hmm.
I remember being a child and like watching my dad shave and like crawling up on the counter and then practicing shaving with him. So like I would use my toothbrush. So I would make foam with the toothpaste in my mouth and then put it on my
Oh,
face and then shave my face with my toothbrush.
that's so cute.
And like I like just, as a kid, I was just like, oh yeah, I'm totally gonna grow up and I'm gonna be a lot like my dad. Like it just
Hmm.
like didn't occur to me that like that was just not gonna happen without a lot of help.
Hmm. Yeah.
So like early childhood was just kind of, I think like a lot of kids, just kind of doing my own thing. And then as I go into like public school, that changes and there's like more reinforcement of gender binary. And I have like a lot of anxiety around appearance and stuff like that. And then not till college when I started being introduced to different terminology and concepts around gender, was I able to start putting those experiences into like different language, like genderqueer or non-binary, and then I was able to start making like conscious decisions about like my appearance and how I wanted to identify.
Hmm.
So yeah, like there was some understanding of it, but limited vocabulary when I was really young. And then college started having more language and more introduced to more ideas. But it was always a little challenging because like the college that I went to was predominantly white. So those concepts of gender were very, very, very whitewashed, which I'm also going to say is very colonial. It took me some years after college to really figure out like where I stood with that because like I didn't identify as trans for a really long time because of like who I was seeing in those spaces and how they were relating to gender. Like Filipinos have a history where a lot of our ethnic groups have matriarchal structures, but
Hmm.
that's overlaid with like Spanish colonial machismo. So it's like a little complicated where there's some like matriarchal aspects culturally, but then on like a structural level, it's more patriarchal. So like
Okay.
I grew up with a lot of really strong women around me, like very strong, like boss bitch energy. And my dad was was the one who did a lot of the cooking and the domestic chores. And
Mm.
so, like the feminine mystique didn't really make sense to me. I'm like, well,
Mm.
yeah, my mom wasn't the one who was at home cooking and doing all those chores. My dad was better at it, so he did it.
Okay.
Like my mom was a nurse and she was like out of the house working. My dad also, like both of my parents worked a lot
Yeah.
and both of them took on different aspects of like home administration.
Hmm.
But it wasn't from necessarily like a white gender equality way. It was just like everyone has to like pull their weight here because because
Yeah, survival.
yeah, and then like I go to college and I'm like, wait, how come all of the white dudes here can't do anything? Why are they eating all of the food that I cook and stealing my toilet paper? What's happening here?
Oh
And
man.
suddenly I've like put in a hyper feminine role, like oh
Mm.
that looks hyper feminine from a white orientation,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
was never feminized for me and my family.
Yeah.
There were other parts of behavior that were feminized, but not that.
Hmm.
So anyways, like, like as like being past college and then in adulthood and having more access to thinking about how colonization has affected gender and how that's like kind of trickled down to my experience, then it's different. Like I use the term non-binary it's in dialogue to like a white gender binary.
Hmm.
But like Tagalog doesn't have gendered pronouns in it. Like gender in that way did not exist. Like the healers, traditional healers in the Philippines, a lot, not always, but a lot of times they were either women or people who were like had like masculine and feminine traits.
Hmm.
Like and might be interpreted as non-binary now or trans now, but that language, those concepts,
Yeah.
like again, that's like a European colonial concept.
Yeah.
So like there are third genders in the Philippines that are
Hmm.
like widely recognized.
Hmm.
It's just like all a different orientation of thinking of all of these terms and identities.
Hmm.
And I think that so I'm an acupuncturist and I'm also trained as a Hilot Binabalan, so someone who practices traditional medicine from the Philippines. And like we are emphasized to embody all of these different traits of being feminine and masculine. And like a lot of our deities do not fit the gender binary either.
Hmm.
So if I'm like my queerness is like very tied, my queerness and my gender identity is very tied to understanding the effects of colonization
Hmm.
on how we relate to the world and each other.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, like I didn't grow up in the Philippines, and I think that's also very important to acknowledge. Like I grew up in the States, and so it's not like me, like I'm also not trying to like reclaim an experience that hasn't been mine.
Hmm.
Like I come from this like in an ancestral way, but I also like am very much a product of growing up in Southern California in like the desert and living most of my life on the West Coast and having that be part of my experience as well. And that like physical landscape being part of my experience. And I
Yeah.
think that like when people are like the reason people that we might identify as non-binary or trans were chosen to hold medicine or practice medicine in like traditional Philippine arts is because we are able to see different perspectives that are not accessible to like most people. And I think
Hmm.
that to me, that is like also evidence of like where autism can play a role or neurodivergence can play a role, where
Yeah.
it's like intrinsically connected to someone's gender experience.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
someone who is both feminine and masculine can walk and understand those different roles. But
Hmm.
also that's just like one piece of it. It's also looking at all the other liminal spaces that someone has access to when they think outside of those social constructs or exist outside of those social constructs, rather. I think it's important to understand our histories, but also I think it's complicated to reconstruct and reclaim something because I
Yeah.
think it can very easily become a purity culture thing where you're trying to
Yeah.
get as accurate and authentic as possible, but authenticity is a myth.
Hmm.
Right. I think there are folks where it is their role to like kind of rediscover a lot of those histories. And for me, I have less interest in doing it because I'm like, well, what is the context that I'm working in now? How does it relate to this other stuff from the past?
Yeah.
I wonder, like for those of us who have features like hypersensitive, like sensory, like hypersensory experiences, or like a lot of pattern recognition as part of our traits, like how does that fit into medicine, and especially medicine where there's like spiritual intersections in it as well, right? Like we are perceiving things that a lot of people are challenged to perceive, like either physically or seeing patterns of the body, of the environment, and all of these things, you know?
Yeah.
Like it might seem extra sensory, or it might
Mm.
seem, whether or not you believe in spirits, like it's still someone who is picking up on more data or different data than people around them. Like that
Yeah.
is useful. It's useful to me, I feel like,
Mhm.
because I am like when you are trained in Chinese medicine, everything about someone can be diagnostic, from the sound of their voice, how they smell, like their body odor is
Mhm.
diagnostic. Like watching someone, how that person moves in space can be diagnostic, not just the complaints that they're coming in with. Like you look at all of that person's body. Like is their
Yeah.
eyes shiny? Are their eyes shiny? What is the texture of their hair like? Is it like
Mhm.
greasy? Is it dry? Is it like what is their skin like? Is there shen showing through their skin?
Mhm. Yeah. Oh, and Shen as in like the spirit or like
Yeah.
the life force, right?
Yeah.
Would you be open to sharing things that you struggle with like ADHD, even after, diagnosis and working with very understanding clients where you could disclose to them that you're ADHD and, you're able to create like a sensory environment at work that works for you. What are some things that you still struggle with?
Oh yeah. I'm in my head, I'm like, how detailed should I get? Because I am the type of autistic who doesn't always know when too much information is too
Uh,
much. Short-term memory issues for sure. So I try to write things down as much as
mm,
I can. I feel like I have a lot of practices in place that sort of hide the memory loss.
mhm,
For whatever reason, people just assume that I don't struggle mentally as much as I actually do,
mm,
because it's hidden, like taking notes a lot. Like I have like 50 alarms for everything. Like I have a paper planner, I have my online planner that's also on my phone, and then I have Finch, which is like, do you know Finch?
Yes, I
The
have all
cute,
those things
you
too.
have a burp. Can we share burbs?
Yes.
Like, so I also have that to remind me of things. Like, I have like weekly house meetings with my household to check in about chores and stuff. So we're like constantly reminding each other. So it's like a extensive amount of work
Yeah.
just to make sure I show up on time. And I am very good at showing up on time, but there's a lot of scaffolding that makes that happen. And then when the scaffolding is off, like I'm like time traveling. Like I show up a week early to meetings sometimes. I did that like over the summer. Like I was showing up to job interviews like a week early,
Mhm.
or like like just usually it's early because I'm like so anxious that I'm gonna forget
Yeah.
that the anxious anxiety creates like urgency or whatever, and I'm showing up at weird times. So there's that, and then there's like physical stuff that is, I do my best to avoid it, but it just happens sometimes. Like I also have like my digestion is where a lot of my stress is held. So if I'm out of balance, that's one of the first places that gets affected. So I will have like really horrible digestive episodes,
Mhm.
or I can't leave the house,
Mm.
or I'm
Yeah.
like in bed all day.
Yeah.
Or I'll have like last week I was having a really hard time because I just kept having meltdowns like one after the other for a
Mhm.
few days. And that's exhausting. Like
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
exhausting, and it makes it really hard to interface with other people. If I'm in that kind of a state, like I don't see clients,
Yeah.
which, as someone who is primarily self-employed, and I see people on like an appointment basis, then that's like a huge loss of income.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
And if I wasn't self-employed, if I was, employed somewhere else, like not all places will accommodate that, or
Yeah.
have like PTO, like paid time off for things like that. So
Yeah.
I would say like my autism has affected my ability to make a livelihood a lot. Like
Mhm.
that's probably in a capitalist society, that's like where I have struggled the most, where like I find working in, I thought for a long time that I thought the problem was that I was just like always getting in fights with people, and like I thought it was like a personality issue. And I
Mm.
guess I guess it might still be, but for like my entire adult life, I've struggled financially because I can't keep a job.
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
self-employment, it sounds kind of dreamy, but part of the reason I'm self-employed is because I can't keep a job.
Mhm. Yeah.
Even though it's not the most stable income, it has been a way for me to work more consistently in like a job that I enjoy, in an interest, and like an interest that I have that also aligns with my values, and I get to like help my community. So that's probably one of the biggest hurdles that affects my life overall.
Yeah.
And that is also like a thing, like being raised in like an Asian American family. Like all of my other cousins and siblings are all in like the Western medical field. They're all very financially stable. stable for the most part and like making like decent wages. They're also like for I think all of them are also like cis het. So they have like
Mm-hmm.
other access to privilege that I don't have.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like I am definitely in a lot of ways the black sheep of the family where they're just like, what's wrong with you? Why can't you get a job? Like, why can't you work in this certain way? And I'm just like, I thought that maybe I was just, weirdly defiant and like being rebellious. And then as I'm older, I'm like, oh, you're not really rebellious. You literally just you couldn't. Like, I wouldn't be able to work like night shift like a nurse. Like, I don't think I can do a 24-hour shift.
Yeah.
Like I have
Yeah.
all of these other physical needs where my body will just like shut down or like I'll lose my ability to talk
Yeah.
because of all of these other demands on me.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, yeah, like I am still trying to understand like how to be autistic, how to take care of myself, and then also interface with the way that like capitalism is happening.
That's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah. And there is a shift in that I don't blame myself as much anymore, and I
Yeah.
have a lot more compassion for myself, and I understand that the system that I'm interfacing with was not designed with me in mind.
Thank you so much for sharing that story. I always ask everyone this, like what brings you the most joy, and you feel free to go into special interest galore here. Yeah, like what makes you happy.
Well, this is like inseparable, I think, from cultural identity, but food. Like I'm
Hmm.
just very food driven.
Hmm.
Filipinos as a whole, and I think also just like a lot of Asian cultures, very obsessed with food.
Yeah.
So like cooking food, eating food, history of food. I could talk about that forever. Yeah, I find so much story in food, and it's like a somatic way of like telling a history. And like
Yeah.
it's I suspect that like I have relatives that are undiagnosed autistics, like older relatives,
Yeah.
and food was always a way for us to it was like the way for us to show affection and relatability that was not that like kind of went beyond like other things. Like we didn't necessarily have to talk to be able to like give someone like a really nice meal,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that I think is important, especially when you have like a bicultural background, like where you have relatives who are immigrants, but then you grew up here and there's just a lot of different experiences
Yeah.
at the table. It's also a way for me to like I that's how I show affection to a lot of people that I care about is like through food
Hmm.
because sometimes words just don't quite get there.
Yeah.
And it's like one of the extreme pleasures, like physical pleasures, is to like be able to eat really good food for me.
Did you ever find mooncake? That's how we
Oh, I
bonded
did. I
first.
bought like
Yeah.
4 or 5 of different kinds.
Hmm.
And my favorite is still I think the lotus ones
Yeah.
with like the
Yeah.
salty egg yolks.
Hmm.
I got the jujubes this year, which I liked. They weren't my favorite, but I liked them. They were kind of like fig Newtons.
Do you also celebrate Mid-Autumn Festival? I'm not sure if you call it that in the States.
So yes, it is celebrated here mostly with like Southeast Asian and East Asian communities.
Hmm.
There's not a lot of folks, there's not a huge community in Baltimore itself. Like most of my memories of that were from when I lived in Seattle. So I was around that area for like 15 years. So there's much more like public celebrations around that.
Hmm.
And I miss that a lot. So that's why I had to like go and find myself some mooncakes. I was like, at least have like a piece of that
Yeah, yeah,
tradition
same.
with me.
I called like 5 bakeries here and did my best, and my Mandarin is limited but passable. And then I found a place that was so far away, so it was a painful car ride, but it was worth it. It was so worth it. I did watch some YouTube videos about how Mid-Autumn Festival is celebrated in the States, and it looks very different because like in Singapore we celebrate it at night, but then I know in some cities in the US it's a parade during the day.
Huh.
Yeah.
Oh, I always thought it was like a night thing because you're like hanging out with
Yeah.
the moon.
Yeah, yeah, so that was interesting. And I saw like lion dance and I was like, that isn't that more of a like a Lunar New Year thing? But for me, like I've always preferred Mid-Autumn Festival because it's at night and there's no it's a lot quieter than Lunar New
Oh,
Year.
yeah.
And then I realized why after I got diagnosed. I was just like, this is the perfect festival for me. It's so like low sensory overload for me.
Yeah, and that's a different energy too, because it's like you're going into metal season, so everything is like much more chill, like the energy
Mhm.
is going down, and then Lunar New Year, it's like spring, so
Uh-huh. So we're gonna wrap up soon, I promise. What's the biggest thing you want other like late diagnosed queer ADHD BIPOC folks to know to help them feel less alone?
What do I want them to know? Just that, like, we each have our individual experiences, but also there is a collective experience
Hmm.
around being a late diagnosed autistic who is BIPOC, and there are so many of us, like so many of us. We
Yeah,
just aren't necessarily super visible.
yeah.
Being in the autistic community has been really great because there we get to like communicate and connect, and there's like folks who are regularly in the meetings, but then there's like even more folks who are just sort of who are there who are not participating in that particular way, but like there are so many of us everywhere. A lot of us are maybe unidentified or undiagnosed, but we have like kindred spirits around us all the time.
Hmm.
And I think that, like, like if we exist, there's also like, if you do any sort of ancestral practice or veneration, that means we came from tons of other autistic ancestors.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, one, like, we know that autism like runs in families,
Hmm.
like, that's true, but also, like, so many other autistics came before us. And that knowledge and that experience and that ancestral guidance, I believe, is like a birthright for us.
Hmm.
So we're
Yeah.
not alone like in our present existence, and we're also not alone in like our intergenerational ancestors too.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because like ancestral like reconnection is such an important part of my neurodivergent journey actually, grounding ourselves in something bigger than what we can like immediately see and the lineages that we come from. What about the biggest thing you want the world to know, which could be society, or I don't know if you've past medical professionals that you've worked with or policymakers?
I feel like I should give a really deep answer for this, but I'm like, y'all are missing out. Your our exclusion is like to your own detriment.
Hmm.
Like autistics are, I mean, outside from the fact that, we all have like a role to play in our ecosystem and we all contribute to abundance. And I don't mean it in like a capitalist way, like as
Yeah,
in money,
yeah.
but we all are part of an ecosystem and we all belong there. I don't know, autistics are so fun. Like they're so fun. There's so much brilliance there. There's like, yeah, like I don't know. It's like, why would you make a soup without any seasoning? Like it just doesn't. It just doesn't make sense to me. Like
Yeah.
that like this incredible group of people with such different backgrounds and experiences and perspectives, like why would you pass that up? Like even for just like personal enrichment and relationship.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time here. Can you let the audience know how we can support your work, especially if they're located in Baltimore?
Yeah, so I'm in a interesting place in my work right now because I'm actually moving
Oh.
this year in like November, December from Baltimore to Philly. So not a super far move, like a couple
Mhm.
hours north. I'm not sure exactly how my practice is going to look during my move, but I will be continuing my practice. So the best thing to do is look at my website and join my newsletter because that's where I post all my updates on Substack.
Mhm.
So my website is the-atang.site. So the-atang.site.
Mhm.
And atang is a word that in Ilocano means like a food offering that you would give to an ancestor, but then in like Tagalog it means like to share a burden. So that's the website that I used for my medicine practice.
Do you take remote clients?
Yeah, I do. It
Oh,
depends
okay.
on what service folks want to use, but yes, I work with folks remote and in person.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Lakan Ubaya, and for sharing all of your wisdom, especially about Chinese medicine and your story about being ADHD. So, once again, for everyone who's listening, this has been Queer ADHD by POC, and Lakan Ubaya's story will also be in the book where we go deeper into the queer ADHD BIPOC experience. If you want to support the book and the podcast, it will help us pay everyone who has been in this project because we want to support queer ADHD BIPOC. So go to rewilding.cc/book and you can pre-order a copy of the book. And until then, we'll see you in the next episode.